What up, ladies and gents? This is George Bean, and with Halloween approaching, and with I having been reviewing the Scream films and talking very positively about its director, I thought it'd be nice to make a retrospective and tribute to the late and great director Wes Craven, a man who holds the right to say, I revitalized the horror genre twice. What you got? So to start things off, like every other filmmaker, Wes Craven started off as a nobody. He initially worked as a professor in the academic work, but he eventually left that career to step behind the filmmaking camera, starting off, in his own words, making hardcore X-rated porno films under pseudonyms, or so he says in the documentary Deep Throat. But it wouldn't be until 1972 when he would direct his first ever feature film, that being the rape and revenge film, The Last House on the Left, which was produced by future Friday the 13th filmmaker Sean S. Cunningham. Despite the amateur directing, it did gain a somewhat positive reception, especially from critic Roger Ebert, and it would certainly put Wes Craven's name into the spotlight, beginning what would become a 40-year-long career for him. And this would also begin what would become a strained relationship Wes would have with the MPAA, who practically slapped Last House with an X rating multiple times. Come 1977 would be Wes's second feature film, that being The Hills Have Eyes, about a nuclear family who, during a cross-country road trip, becomes stranded in a desert landscape, and to make matters worse, unbeknownst to them, a clan of psychopathic cannibals are watching them, ready for the right moment to attack. It's a really good movie, while not exactly the big success to break the champagne bottle over, but it is still a pretty good movie for Craven fans. The next year, Wes would go into TV territory to direct a TV film titled The Stranger in Our House, Stranger in Our House, starring Linda Blair of Exorcist fame, about a teenage girl who begins to suspect that her visiting cousin may actually be a practitioner of witchcraft. It premiered on Halloween night 1978 on the NBC channel, and after a successful run on that channel, the film was retitled to Summer of Fear and given a theatrical release in Europe. But now, most days, you'll find the receptions to be a bit mixed at best. And fun fact, Linda Blair would go on to make a cameo as a reporter in Scream. Go check it out. You'll find her. You'll see. Come 1981, Wes would helm a horror film titled Deadly Blessing, about a widow who becomes embroiled with a neighboring religious community that may have diabolical plans for her. While the film was poorly received, many people now say that the film, quote, finds Wes Craven in a transitional phase between his hard-hitting early work and his later commercial successes. In the next year, Wes would take a step into making a superhero film titled Swamp Thing, starring Ray Wise and Adrienne Barbeau, based on the DC Comics character of the same name. The movie received generally average to positive reviews, and has gained a somewhat following in how it differs from most of Wes's other bodies of work. I actually caught this years ago on the Sci-Fi Channel. I didn't even know he directed it. I was shocked. But I'll try to get around to watching it again sometime in the future. But it wouldn't be until 1984 when he would rocket to popularity with the release of his supernatural slasher film, A Nightmare on Elm Street, which would introduce to the world the notorious slasher film villain Freddy Krueger, played stellarly by Robert Englund. With a budget of $1.8 million, the film went on to gross over $25 million at the US box office, and was met with rave critical reviews, and has went on to make a very significant impact on the horror genre. It started a franchise consisting of six sequels, a television series in 1988 titled Freddy's Nightmares, a Freddy vs. Jason crossover in 2003, and a remake in 2010, all of which Wes had no involvement in. Now there are talks of there being a reboot in development. Yeah, we'll see. But in the end, the film would practically skyrocket Craven into popularity in the horror genre. After Nightmare's success would be West's next film, that being The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, a sequel to his 1977 original film. And a film Wes claimed he only did in desperate need of money, and has practically disowned since then. Interesting thing is that though it was released after Nightmare on Elm Street, Hills 2 was actually shot before Nightmare went into production. According to Craven, only 2/3 of the movie was shot before the studio halted production due to a lack of money. But when Nightmare became a surprise success, the studio convinced Craven to finish Hills 2 using only the footage that had already been shot. Since there was not enough for a feature-length film, footage from the first Hills film was edited into the sequel to pad out the running time, a la Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 style. It's not a great sequel to watch, not as good as the original, and it's no wonder Wes disowned the movie. Soon after Nightmare's success, Wes went on to direct what could quite possibly be one of the most difficult films he would ever be involved in. That film was the 1986 film Deadly Friend, which was written by Bruce Joel Rubin, who would go on to write 1990's Jacob's Ladder and Ghost. But with Deadly Friend, the story about it, how it was developed, is much more interesting to read about than the actual movie itself. Wes and Bruce originally intended for the film to be a PG-rated sci-fi drama thriller with at its center a macabre and tragic love story between Paul and Christy. Being inspired by the change of direction John Carpenter took when he made Starman, Wes used Deadly Friend as his attempt to prove that he could do more than just violent horror movies. But as production ensued, many major problems began to show up. After assembling a rough cut based on Wes's original vision, the studio, Warner Brothers, decided to screen the film to a test audience, which consisted mostly of Craven fans. Of course, this audience criticized the film for its lack of graphic bloody violence and gore that Craven's other films included. And that was when Warner found out about Wes's growing popularity as a horror director. It was then that Warner demanded massive script rewrites and reshoots, which included filming gorier death scenes and nightmare sequences, similar to those of Nightmare on Elm Street. These drastic changes would result in Deadly Friend being released as a drastically different and jumbled, incoherent film, losing much of the original plot and more scenes between characters, while other scenes, including more grisly deaths and a new and possibly stupid ending, were added. Then, to make matters even worse, Not only was Wes also going through a very turbulent divorce from his ex-wife Mimi, but on top of all that, he also ended up being booted off two other big projects he was slated to direct, those being Beetlejuice and Superman 4. So safe to say that Wes was going through a very rough part of his life at that point. Because of his nightmarish experience, Wes has pretty much disowned the film since then. But in April 2014, an online petition cropped up demanding for Warner to release Wes's original cut to home video. I myself had the opportunity to sign this petition. In light of Wes' tragic passing in 2015, and if you are a die-hard Craven fan, I'd recommend checking out this petition. And if you like what it discusses, please take the chance to sign it too. And I wonder, what would a Superman 4 directed by Wes Craven be like? Wishful thinking. After the disaster of Deadly Friend, Wes would move on to direct the 1988 fantasy horror film The Serpent and the Rainbow, starring Bill Pullman, about an anthropologist who goes to Haiti to uncover rumors of a drug used by black magic practitioners to turn people into zombies. The movie received mixed critical reviews, but has gone on to gain a cult following amongst Craven fans for its premise. Next year, Wes would direct the 1989 supernatural horror comedy Shocker, starring future director Peter Berg and future X-Files cast member Mitch Pileggi, about a serial killer who, after being executed by electrocution, continues on in spirit form, using the electricity to continue his murderous spree. The movie was intended by Craven and Universal Pictures to launch a new slasher franchise as a response to Nightmare on Elm Street, because that film's sequels were made without Craven, and he wasn't even paid for those sequels. But unfortunately, the film did not do exactly that well at the box office, and was given negative receptions, with many criticizing it for being too derivative of Nightmare, but it has also gone on to gain a large cult following among fans, with some considering it to be their favorite Craven film. Come 1991 would be Wes's next film, titled The People Under the Stairs, a home invasion action horror comedy about a trio of fledgling residents who decide to rob their landlord's home, only to find a dark and shocking secret the landlords had been hiding deep within the house's walls, forcing the trio to fight for their survival. While not exactly a moderate success, it has also gone on to gain a cult following in the ensuing years ever since. In 1994, in celebration of 10 years of Freddy Krueger, Wes returned to the very series he helped launch in the first place, with the seventh installment titled Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which, unlike the previous films, was a standalone set in Hollywood and focuses on Nancy's real-life acting counterpart, Heather Langenkamp, as she finds herself being terrorized by a sinister demon who takes the form of Freddy. The movie was a moderate success, with many considering it to have ended the Nightmare franchise on a high note, and has been seen as a prelude to Craven's next film, Scream, for its metafiction. This was actually one of two very first films I've seen by Wes Craven as a kid, the other being Scream. And I knew nothing about the whole Nightmare movie before watching it. I just thought the title, that sounds fun, and all that. And when I first heard the name Wes Craven as a kid by that, I thought it was one of the coolest names ever. But yeah, to get back on track, then in the year after, Wes went on to make a horror comedy called Vampire in Brooklyn, starring Eddie Murphy, which did not do fairly well both critically and financially, but it has gone on to gain a cult status in the ensuing years since. Years later, Craven would look back on this film, stating that it was a difficult shoot because Eddie Murphy tried not to be funny at the time. This was during a time when Murphy was experiencing a series of flops and wanting to prove that he could be a serious actor. But it wasn't until next year, in 1996, when Wes would strike gold with the slasher film Scream. With overwhelmingly positive receptions from both critics and fans alike, it was a hit at the box office, with with a box office of $173 million worldwide against a $15 million budget. Like Nightmare Before It, Wes introduced to the horror genre a new slasher film villain in the form of the Ghostface Killer, which would go on to become a new horror icon for years to come. The film also launched its already relatively unknown cast into stardom, including Neve Campbell, who gave a stellar performance as lead protagonist Sidney Prescott. It made its writer Kevin Williamson a hot writer for Hollywood, with him going on to make the popular TV shows such as Dawson's Creek, The Vampire Diaries, and most recently the Fox detective series The Following, starring Kevin Bacon and James Purefoy. But in the end, Scream had only proved that the horror genre will never die. And like many other films, when a movie becomes an extreme success, of course Hollywood is going to want to make a sequel, which would bring us to Scream 2, which was immediately fast-tracked to being released just only a year after the first film's release. But despite this, the film suffered a few problems, specifically the entire original script being leaked onto the internet, revealing the identity of the killers, forcing Craven and Williamson to rewrite the script whilst shooting the film on a rushed schedule. Sometimes the script pages were completed on the day of filming. Despite these issues, Scream did go on to earn $172 million worldwide, and also received positive reviews, with some critics arguing that it surpassed the original in terms of quality. You can actually find my review for Scream 1 and 2. On my channel, I actually did 2 reviews for it. And with that much success he had gained from Scream's success, producers Bob and Harvey Weinstein, Harvey, yeah, I know, offered Wes a 3-picture deal, 2 of which were to be horror films, the last of which was to be what they would call a petticoat film, or i.e. a costume drama, of which Craven, being a fan of classical music, chose to be his next film, it being the 1999 music drama Music of the Heart, starring Meryl Streep. Due to it being mostly a music drama, this became notable for being Craven's first and only ever film that wasn't not horror theme, and it was the only time in his career that Craven would ever direct an actor to an Oscar nomination. While not exactly a movie to go nuts over, it is an interesting glimpse of what Craven could be capable of outside of the horror genre. And finally, Wes would begin the millennium with Scream 3, which would end up being the only film to not be written by Kev Williamson, but instead by the atrocious screenwriter Aaron Kruger, whom I will definitely talk about in my future Scream 3 review. Don't worry, I've got so much to talk about Aaron. Being advertised as the final chapter in the trilogy, Scream 3 went on to gross up to $161 million worldwide, and has received a somewhat mixed response, with the main consensus being that the film had become precisely what Scream had originally produced. Had spoofed, to be exact. But with that said, it seemed like... but with that said, the critics did believe that it was a worthy conclusion to the Scream trilogy, and it pretty much seemed like the Scream series was at an end. Done for. After Scream 3, it seemed that Wes had decided to slow down a bit as a director, as it wouldn't be for 5 years until Wes would make 2 films in 2005. The first one being the werewolf body horror film, Cursed, which would reunite him with Scream writer Kevin Williamson. Despite this, the film would go through a rough 2-year development, during which producers Bob and Harvey Weinstein kept asking for reshoots and changes to the plot, re-edited the movie to give a PG-13 rating rather than the original intended R rating, and fired legendary makeup artist Rick Baker to replace the werewolves he had created with computer-generated ones. No surprise, the film was a box office failure and was panned by critics. Craven himself was very displeased with the final result, and I wouldn't blame him for it. But then in the next few months would be the 2005 Hitchcockian thriller Red Eye, starring Rachel McAdams and Cillian Murphy, about a hotel manager who becomes embroiled in an assassination plot by a terrorist whilst on a red-eye flight to Miami. The movie received positive receptions from both critics and fans of Craven's work, and was also a box office success. I actually seen this movie in theaters when I was 12 years old, and I thought it was okay. I liked it as a Hitchcockian thriller, and the one time when the terrorists shoot the javelin missile at the hotel was actually pretty good. I think that's possibly the only time we'll ever get to see Wes Craven directing an action scene with an explosion. After this, Wes wouldn't make another film for another 5 years. But during these 5 years, he would have heavy involvement in developing remakes of his old films. Specifically, those being The Hills Have Eyes and The Last House on the Left. With Hills, which was helmed by French horror director Alessandra Aja. I think I got that right. That guy who directed High Tension was a moderate success, whilst Last House barely did well, with many people left divided over it. Me, I thought it was good. I think it is an improvement over the 1972 original in terms of tone and story, and that's possibly my opinion, but I just think that when you watch the original, the tone is all over the place, but it goes to show how in the 20 years since, if you go from the original Last House on the Left to Scream, it shows just how much Wes has improved as a filmmaker when it comes to shooting his films. But anyway, then it wouldn't be until 2010 when Wes would go on to direct another film, that being the supernatural horror film My Soul to Take, about a supposedly long-dead serial killer who resurfaces to target a group of 17 teens who were born on the very day he supposedly died. The film was post-converted to 3D in the immediate wake of 3D having rocketed into popularity thanks to the massive success of James Cameron's Avatar. I have seen My Soul in 3D, but I was left confused by what I was watching and the jumpy tone in it. I guess I wasn't that prepared for a Wes Craven film like that. And I think that was due to the fact that me and my pops had gotten into the theater 5 minutes into the movie, and the 3D felt pointless. It's obviously been post-converted to 3D, so don't watch it in 3D at all. Just watch it in 2D. The 3D's not worth it, to be honest. In the end, the film was very unsuccessful at the box office, and received generally unfavorable receptions. But then, in the next year, in April 2011, would be Scream 4, which would reunite him with Kev Williamson and the principal cast members Neve Campbell, David Arquette, and Courtney Cox, as well as a new cast of teens. Scream 4 would this time tackle the 2000 decades of horror remakes and reboots. But upon release, the film received a mixed to positive reception, and only ended up making $97 million worldwide against a $40 million budget. The film had been suggested of being the first of a new trilogy of Scream films, but with such a very low reception, it put any growing doubt on a possible Scream 5 ever being made. However, little did we know that Scream 4 would become the last ever film Wes Craven would ever direct, as on August 30th, 2015, Craven would tragically pass away at the age of 76 as a result of brain cancer. The era of Wes Craven was at an end after 40 years, but one thing for certain is that he has left behind a very powerful legacy as the master of horror, and will forever be remembered as a legend to horror fans, including myself. He has become an idol to me as a horror fan, and genuinely a nice man whom I would happily listen to on his audio commentaries and interviews. He's a really great man, and nobody has ever said a bad thing about him. And anybody who has collaborated with him. As an aspiring writer myself, he has become influential to me when I wrote my own horror stories. He has become someone I have looked up to as an inspiration. He is to this day one of my favorite, all-time favorite directors out there, and a man who I will deeply respect for the rest of my life. And to quote the late and great Craven, the first monster you have to scare the audience with is yourself. Thank you for such great advice, Mr. Craven. You were an awesome director. May you rest in peace. So thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you enjoyed the video I have made about my tribute to Wes Craven, a great horror idol, and a man whose legacy is forever cemented. So thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed the video, and until then, see you next time. And as always, Happy Halloween. Peace.